Welcome to Jay Coletti's Racket Reviews. My name is Jay Coletti and I will be your hostess. Here on Racket Reviews, we are dedicated to learning about all things organized crime, and I'm very excited to talk with you today about the Colombo family and its origins. This is probably one of the more famous of the New York crime families. If you have not already, please make sure to watch all of the previous Mafia family videos. They're all going to be very interconnected, so it's important to keep up to get all perspectives on the various families' drama. We have a lot to cover today with the Colombo family, so let's get right to it. The beginnings of the Colombo family really started with the end of the Castellamarese War, when Joe PROFACI, somebody who had for the most part and for all available knowledge remained neutral throughout the war, became boss. Giuseppe Joe PROFACI was born in the Villabate province of Sicily on October 2nd, 1897, to a family that was likely in high standing with the Villabate Mafia. PROFACI was arrested twice in his native Villabate and would be sentenced to a year in prison for theft in 1920. After serving his time in Sicily, PROFACI immigrated to the United States in 1921, arriving in New York City on September 4th of that year. He would move inland to Chicago to pursue legitimate business ownership. By 1925, he had started two failed businesses, a grocery store and a bakery, before moving back to New York to begin an olive oil importing business, where he would get the nickname of the olive oil and tomato paste king of America. The third time is the charm, I suppose, but many speculate that his family connection in Villabate is why his olive oil business really took off in New York. PROFACI would run his olive oil business for a couple of years before becoming a United States citizen on September 27, 1927, and moving to Brooklyn, where he would become involved in the gangs there. Before I go any further, I need to talk with you about PROFACI's biological family, as a lot of them end up being part of his mafia family. His son, Frank PROFACI, joined his father in the mafia business, while his son, John PROFACI, did not. Two of PROFACI's daughters married sons of the Zerilli crime family, or Detroit Mafia, William Tocco and Joseph Zerilli. PROFACI's brother Salvatore would serve as his consigliere, his brother-in-law Joseph Magliocco would serve as his underboss, and PROFACI's niece would end up marrying Salvatore Bonanno, son of the Bonanno family crime boss Joseph Bonanno. What's strange about PROFACI's rise to power is that it wasn't the typical route that you would see with most mafia bosses, where they work their way up through the ranks. What we do know is that Salvatore Diacola, the boss and founder of the Gambino family, was killed on October 10, 1928. Later that year, PROFACI attended a mob meeting on December 5, 1928 in Cleveland, Ohio, and that he walked away from that meeting as the Brooklyn crime boss, replacing Diacola's position, and ALFRED MINEO would take over Diacola's family. Many assume that PROFACI's mobbed-up family in the old country was what cemented his role as a Brooklyn boss. Others say that he made many powerful friends through his olive oil business, but what is most likely is that it was some combination of the two that got him into that position. By 1930, PROFACI was controlling Brooklyn's gambling, prostitution, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and narcotics businesses, and unlike his legitimate pursuits, ran these businesses very well. It is widely believed that PROFACI remained neutral during the Castellamarese War, but other sources say that he had aligned himself with Salvatore Maranzano. He kept out of the war enough to survive. The same could not be said for Mineo. At the end of the Castellamarese War, Lucky Luciano took control and created the Mafia Commission, wherein he established the 5 families of New York, with one of them being PROFACI's family, now the Colombo family. By establishing PROFACI as boss, Luciano gave PROFACI a seat at the commission table, where he would help govern all Cosa Nostra activities and meet his ally and eventual nephew-in-law's father, Joseph Bonanno. PROFACI's money was not all made illegally, however. He owned 20 businesses in New York and employed hundreds. Mamma Mia Importing Company, his olive oil business, really hit its stride during the 1940s when demand for olive oil increased in World War II. PROFACI was doing great. He owned multiple homes, one in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, one in Miami Beach, Florida, and one in Hightstown, New Jersey. It is in the estate in Hightstown, previously owned by Theodore Roosevelt, on which PROFACI would own his own airstrip and a personal chapel with an altar that replicated that of the one in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, so that he could have priests come to him to celebrate Mass. PROFACI was an extremely devout Catholic. He was a Knights of Columbus member and made huge cash donations to Catholic charities. In 1949, the Vatican even received a petition from a group of New York Catholics to confer a knighthood on PROFACI. However, after the Brooklyn district attorney had complained, this request was denied by the Vatican. In 1952, a thief stole the jeweled crowns from the Regina Pacis Votive shrine in Brooklyn. PROFACI sent out his own men to recover the jewels and allegedly had the thief killed by choking him with a rosary. The rosary portion of that story has been proven to be fictional embellishments, but it makes for such a great image I just had to mention it. Ralph Amino, the thief, died of gunshot wounds, and the jewels were returned to the cathedral rectory in a mysterious package 8 days after the robbery. It was in 1953 that PROFACI began having trouble with the law. The IRS sued PROFACI for over $1.5 million in unpaid taxes, and they remained unpaid for his whole life. In 1954, the United States Department of Justice moved to revoke Profaci's citizenship and have him deported, since he had lied about having no criminal history in Sicily. However, by 1960, the U.S. Court of Appeals had dropped the case and reversed the deportation order. In 1956, law enforcement recorded a phone call between Profaci and a Sicilian mafia associate about a shipment of Sicilian oranges coming into the United States. When the shipment was intercepted by customs, they found that the shipment contained 90 wax oranges containing a total of 110 pounds of heroin. The wax oranges had been filled so that they weighed about the same as the regular orange, then placed into the shipment among the real oranges. Profaci was never charged for this crime. In 1957, Profaci was one of the 60 men arrested in the disastrous Appalachian meeting. On January 13, 1960, he was convicted of conspiracy and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He wouldn't even serve 1 year. On November 28, 1960, a U.S. Court of Appeals overturned the verdict. Many of Profaci's men considered him miserly, sort of an Ebenezer Scrooge of Cosa Nostra. As per a Sicilian tradition, each member of his family was to pay him a $25 per month tithe. That came to about $50,000 per month. This likely wouldn't have been an issue if Profaci would have done what the Italian tradition suggested, which was to invest that money back into his family, instead of putting the money in his pocket as he did. Profaci was also ruthless. Anyone who expressed discontent was likely to be murdered. Profaci's attitude did not sit well with his capos Joseph, Crazy Joe Gallo, and Frankie Shorts Abetamarco. Abetamarco ran the numbers game, or the Italian lottery, and began to refuse the tithe in the late 1950s. Abetamarco, the Gallo brothers, Larry, Albert, and Joe, and the Garfield boys, a faction of greaser gangs in South Brooklyn led by Carmine Persico, had conspired against Profaci's tithe. Profaci ordered Joe Gallo to kill Abetamarco, and in exchange would give him control of the numbers game. Some say that Gallo refused, others say that he took the deal. In any case, Frank Abetamarco was killed outside of his cousin's bar by Joseph Gioeli, a member of Gallo's crew, and another assassin on November 4th, 1959. This would mark the beginning of the First Colombo Family War. On February 27th, 1961, the Gallos kidnapped 4 of Profaci's men: Joe Magliocco, the underboss, Frank Profaci, Joe's brother, Capo Salvatore Musacchia, and soldier John Shimoni. Profaci avoided capture by flying to Florida. Joe Gallo went to California during this tumultuous time, and it was finally resolved with Profaci's consigliere, Charles Lo Cicero, negotiating peace with the Gallo brothers, and he got the hostages released without incident. But Profaci was lying about this peace deal. Once his men were free, Joseph Gioeli and Larry Gallo were marked for murder. Joseph Gioeli was gunned down after being invited to a deep-sea fishing trip, and Larry Gallo survived his attempted hit by strangulation at the Sahara Club. Carmine Persico of the Garfield boys had betrayed the Gallo brothers and was the perpetrator in the attempted strangulation. After this betrayal, the Gallo brothers gave Carmine Persico his nickname, the Snake. The First Colombo War resulted in 9 murders and 3 disappearances. The authorities eventually caught up to this war, and in November of 1961, Profaci was sentenced to 7 to 14 years in prison for murder. He would die of cancer within a year on June 6, 1962, and was buried at St. John's Cemetery in New York City, making Joe Magliocco the head of the family. Even after Profaci's passing, the Colombo War continued. In 1963, Carmine Persico survived a car bombing, and Larry Gallo survived another assassination attempt by shooting his would-be killer in the groin. On May 19th of that same year, an attempt was made again on Persico when Gallo assassins shot him multiple times, but Persico survived that too. Although Magliocco was the next in line to take control of the family, he was made boss without full commission consent. In 1963, Joseph Bonanno, the head of the Bonanno crime family and longtime friend and family member of Profaci, decided to take matters into his own hands and made plans to assassinate Tommy Lucchese, Carlo Gambino, and Stefano Magaddino of the Buffalo crime family. Magliocco agreed and joined this coup d'etat with Bonanno and gave the contract to his capo and hitman Joseph Colombo. Joe Colombo took the contract, but instead of carrying out the orders, he went straight to the commission. The commission summoned Bonanno and Magliocco to confess. Bonanno, who was worried they might have him killed, went into hiding. Magliocco, whose health was already failing, went to the commission hearing and confessed the whole plot. The commission spared his life, but forced him to retire and pay a $50,000 fine. Magliocco would die on December 28, 1963 of a heart attack and was buried at St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale, New York. Many believed that since Magliocco had confessed the plot to the commission, that Bonanno had actually poisoned Magliocco. In fact, when the FBI caught a New Jersey family discussing this possibility on tape, they exhumed Magliocco's body but found no trace of poison. As a reward for his loyalty to the commission, Joe Colombo was placed as head of the family, thus giving the family the name that we know today. He was the first American-born New York Mafia Don in the New York City crime family's history. Joe Joseph Anthony Colombo was born in New York City on June 16, 1923, to Anthony Colombo, an early member of PROFACI's family. Anthony Colombo would die in 1938 after he and his mistress were garroted and found dead in his vehicle. The murder of Joe Colombo's father was never solved. Colombo would follow in his father's footsteps and join PROFACI's family, where he would start as an enforcer and later move to the position of capo. Colombo would drop out of high school to join the Coast Guard, but was discharged in 1945 after he was diagnosed with neurosis, a term no longer used in the psychiatric community that can be boiled down to an inability to adapt to one's environment. Essentially, Colombo was discharged because he was just that difficult to work with. Colombo had several honest jobs during this time. He worked as a longshoreman for a decade, and then 6 years as a salesman for a meat company. Then he was a real estate salesman. After receiving the contract to take out Lucchese, Gambino, and Magaddino following PROFACI's death, Colombo double-crossed his boss Magliocco and Bonanno family head Joe Bonanno to become head of his own family. On May 9, 1966, Colombo was sentenced to 30 days in jail for contempt by refusing to answer grand jury questions about his finances. In April of 1970, Colombo created the Italian-American Civil Rights League when his son was accused of melting down coins to make silver ingots. Colombo claimed that the FBI harassed Italian-Americans and, in racist fashion, accused them of committing crimes or being guilty by association with their heritage. On April 30th, 1970, he sent 30 picketers to protest the federal persecution of Italians. This picketing went on for weeks. Colombo's group accused the FBI of hiring informants to give false testimony and manufacturing conspiracies against Italian Americans. This spawned the first Italian Unity Day rally on June 29, 1970, where over 50,000 people attended. In February of 1971, Colombo's son was acquitted for the coin charge when the chief witness was arrested for perjury. In that same year, Colombo partnered with the Jewish Defense League, the Jewish counterpart to the Italian American Civil Rights League. 1971 is also the year when Paramount Pictures began filming The Godfather. Due to the movie's content, the motion picture production team worked hand in hand with the Italian American Civil Rights League and, by extension, the Colombo crime family. In fact, Lenny Montana, the actor who played Luca Brasi, was a Colombo family enforcer who was sent to keep an eye on things. And this is why, in my humble opinion, Luca Brasi was the only character that was miscast in an otherwise perfect film. The League insisted that any instance of the word mafia or Cosa Nostra were to be removed from the script, but the screenplay only included 2 such instances, so this wasn't as high a demand as maybe the Italian-American Civil Rights League thought it was. Colombo enjoyed his status as a celebrity don, granting interviews to reporters and appearing in magazines and TV shows, including The Dick Cavett Show. By the way, the first Colombo War had technically ended in 1963, but we would see those old wounds revealed again in 1971 when Joe Gallo was released from prison. 1971 was quite the year for Colombo, and there's more to come. Upon Gallo's release, Colombo invited him to a peace meeting and offered to give him $1,000 as an offering. It was an offer that Gallo could refuse. He said no and insisted on $100,000 to stop the conflict. Colombo did not agree to that deal. On March 11th, 1971, Colombo was convicted of perjury for lying on his application to become a real estate broker. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, but the sentence was delayed pending an appeal. On June 28, 1971, Joe Colombo was shot 3 times by Jerome A. Johnson at the 2nd annual Italian Unity Day as he walked to center stage to give a speech. One of these shots was to the head. Joe Colombo survived, however, but would spend the remaining 7 years of his life paralyzed. According to witnesses and people who knew him, he was still able to move his right thumb and forefinger, recognize people, and speak several words. This shooting would mark the start of the Second Colombo Family War. Jerome Johnson was killed on the spot by one of Colombo's guards. There is no concrete proof that Johnson was connected with Gallo, but many speculate that Gallo had made friends in the Harlem gangs and had hired Johnson to make this hit on Colombo. In retaliation, Joe Gallo would be shot to death at his 43rd birthday celebration. After Colombo was paralyzed, Joseph Iacovelli, his consigliere, briefly took over as acting boss. Iacovelli took out the hit on Gallo and, with fellow Colombo members Carmine Persico and Vincenzo Loy, coordinated the hit on Gallo. After the murder, Iacovelli went into hiding and surrendered to the authorities in 1974. He would never return to the Colombo family and retired to Florida. FBI records show that he died on April 28, 2006. After Iacovelli had left, Vincenzo Loy took over as acting boss. After Loy had taken over as boss, he would be convicted of perjury on June 26, 1973, as he had lied to the grand jury about having visited a Colombo family safe house during Gallo's murder. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but this was overturned. On December 22nd of 1973, he was convicted of stock fraud and was put away for 9 years in February of 1973. 1974. Joseph Brancato, a Marine veteran who was notably low profile in the Mafia, took over as acting boss for 1 year in 1973. He worked closely with Colombo's underboss, Sonny Francis. It was during this time that Carmine Persico would step into his role as boss of the family, forcing Brancato to step aside. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews discussing the origins of the Colombo family. I will be covering Carmine Persico's reign in part 2. He was boss until 2019 when he died, so there's a lot to unpack there and you don't want to miss that, so make sure to tune back in for part 2 of this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click notifications to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao.